All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Giving double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect. Shalom to all the brothers out here laboring in this truth with sincerity. Just coming back with another lesson. Just gonna touch on, some things that was touched on at camp yesterday. The brother Benign brought out Ezekiel 37, and the joining of the northern kingdom and southern kingdom, coming back together in these last days. But, we're just going to take a look at, the effect that the transatlantic slave trade, as well as slavery, the brutalization of the northern tribe, the effect that it has, psychologically, to this present day, because we're still traumatized due to the brutality, the separation, all the things that Esau Edom has done to us, to separate us from who we really are. So we see a picture of the 12 tribes of Israel right here. You got the tribe of Judah, which is the head tribe of the southern kingdom. And you have the tribe of Ephraim, which is the head tribe of the northern kingdom. On the right are, the names of the 12 tribes. Salaki. On the left are the names of the 12 tribes. And on the right are, who they would be today. And make no mistake about it, this is not about color. It's not even really about pretty much, region, because we've been scattered. We scattered all about. But due to the scattering, it's hard to tell who is who. But this is an indication through prophecy of where these tribes would be and who they will be in the last days, just to give an indication, man. So we're going to go to it. We'll go to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. We're going to start at verse 64. It says, "And the Lord Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people." So these 12 tribes will be scattered among all people, in all throughout history. And we know through slavery, we've been scattered all over, man, all over. So, to put a finger on who a tribe or a person, really is based off tribe, it's all spiritual. We don't have any physical records of who we really are and what tribe we descend from, but we just know through the spirit that we are Israelites. So let's get that, man. Let's see. Let's go to the book of Romans, chapter 8, and verse 16. It says, "The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai." So we don't need Esau's DNA records. We don't need none of that, man. The Spirit is telling us, that we're Israelites. We are a part of the 12 tribes of Israel, man. How? Because our spirit resonates with the word. Our spirit resonates with the scriptures. We understand what the scriptures mean through the spirit, as to where other people, that they can't get it, man. These other nations have no clue of what this book is about, because they're not a part of it, and 2/3 of our people, here in Babylon the Great have no clue either. And if they do, they could care less anyway. But, not to ramble on, but, basically it's all through the spirit, man. What we're doing is all through the spirit of the Lord. So let's go back to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Verse 64, it says, "And the Lord Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone." And, worshiping these other deities, further separates you from your heritage, man. You know, but this was all brought upon through the scattering. So let's go to the book, jump down to verse 68. It says, "And the Lord Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships." And it's not talking about the physical Egypt, it's talking about through the spirit, spiritual Egypt, as we were in bondage in the land of Egypt, and we were in bondage in the land of the Americas, mainly here in Babylon the Great, North America. So it says, "The Lord Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." And when you go into that word buy, it simply means to redeem. It means to redeem. And it's the Hebrew word quanah, and it means to redeem. Let's see. Let's see. Lord willing, I can find it. But it's also in the book of Nehemiah. Quanah. You see it? To get, acquire, obtain. Yeah. Let's see. See if I can find it. I know it's in the book of Nehemiah. It might not pull up. Okay, let's see right here. Have redeemed, bro. Yeah, right here. It says, it's the book of Nehemiah. It says, "And I said unto them, we after our ability have redeemed our brethren, the Jews." So let's see, redeemed, and it should be the same word. Quanah. It will be the same word, not should be. Quanah. So basically, it means to redeem. So, when a silly Christian or unbeliever come up and say, you sold yourselves and all kind of stupid stuff like that, man, that's why we go into these words, because they have no clue of what's really going on. It just simply means to redeem, but the average Christian wouldn't know that. I don't think Vocab Malone argues that anymore because he's been proven wrong. But matter of fact, I went to ChatGPT and typed in, the psychological effects of the transatlantic slave trade. And it says intergenerational trauma. We're suffering trauma right now. We suffer trauma that we don't even know we have. We're suffering through it, and we don't even recognize that we have it. It says trauma from slavery, family separation, violence, dehumanization, didn't end with emancipation. It says descendants may inherit stress patterns, distrust, or anxiety passed through both family stories, even biological stress responses. And that's the same thing that we have right now, man. We're we lead all the statistics, man. High blood pressure, heart attacks, heart failure, these things, man. All the diabetes, all the leading physical ailments, your so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans lead these categories, man. And it's all based and due to the curses first and foremost. But, we still carry these problems, this trauma from slavery, man. And two, it says loss of identity. So, it said in the scriptures, man, that the Israelites would lose their identity, lose their heritage, be put off, and in the last days they had to be brought back together, man. So let's get the book of Ezekiel, because this is really explaining, having the loss of identity and coming back in the last days, man, having this identifier indicator. It says reunion of Judah and Israel. You know, we could go to the book of Baruch also, chapter 2, you know, where it says the Lord, you know, in the land of their captivities, they shall remember themselves. So we lost all our heritage. So this is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37 and verse 15. It says, the word of the Lord Yahweh came again unto me, saying, moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel and his companions. It says, and join them one another unto one stick, that they shall become one in thine hand. And you know, you go back to that image. You go back to this image. This is a stick. This is the stick that is talking about. You know, as you see, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, the southern kingdom would be the so-called Negroes, West Indian, and Haitians. So that would be one stick. And then you have the northern kingdom, you know, the rest of the tribes, Simeon all the way down to Issachar would be the other stick, you know, the tribe of Ephraim, you know. So that's the stick that's been. And so Locky just at 1:44, somebody called in and, you know, it start recording. But basically what we just saw is the stick that's being spoken of here. So it says, verse 17, it says, and join them one to another into one stick, that they shall become one in thine hand. And that's it. That's the stick. This is the stick right here. You know, so you join the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom to make one stick. It says, and when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, wilt thou not show us what thou meanest by these? And that's what we're doing when we out on the highways and hedges. We're explaining, you know, this stick, you know, to the public, you know, especially people that inquire about it. You know, when people come up and ask about it, you know, you ask them their nationality, what their father, you know, where did their father descend from, and things like that, you know, trying to get an idea. And then you just go read the spirit, man. You know, read the spirit like we read in the book of Romans chapter 8 and verse 16. This is verse 18. Let's see, verse 19. It says, say unto them, thus said the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in mine hand. It says, and the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, thus saith the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whether they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and will bring them into their own land, you know, as we read in the book of Deuteronomy, you know, chapter 28, verse 64 and 68. You know, we were scattered, you know, through slavery. So let's go back to this Chat GPT. And as you see, it says loss of identity. It says enslaved Africans, but we know that, you know, it was Israelites, you know, enslaved Israelites. It says enslaved, we're going to substitute that. You know, it says enslaved Israelites were stripped of language, names, religion, and cultural practices. Many descendants still struggle with questions like, where exactly do I come from? Which can create feelings of rootlessness or cultural disconnection. And that's, hey, we have that cultural connection now, you know, through the scriptures, man. Yahweh Shem Yahushua has brought us back into our heritage to understand who we are, man. You know, so it says internalized racism. It says centuries of being told that African, Israelite heritage was inferior led to internalized negative belief about so-called blackness, which nobody is black. You know, these devils put Jake against each other, man, based off skin color. You know, the darker you were, the further out in the field you worked, man. You know, and the lighter you were, the closer you were to the house, even in the house, you know. And this carry on to this day, man. You got people had the same father, mother, live in the same house, grew up in the same house. And just because one is lighter than the other, you know, they feel a sense of entitlement, or they feel like they better than the darker skin. You know, this stuff still carries on to this day, man. Says this shows up in colorism, beauty standards favoring Eurocentric features, yeah, and undervaluing, says African culture, but we know community copying mechanism. It says enslaved people develop strong traditions of resilience through music, spirituality, Salakia, oral storytelling, and communal support. Says these coping, did I say copying? Salakia. Coping strategies became cultural strength, but also reflect the need to survive extreme psychological pressure. You know, and this is not even really explaining all the atrocities, man. You know, not only, you know, were you separated, you were brutalized in front of everybody else. You were raped in front of everybody else, and the women as well as the men. Man, we don't even know the half. You know, it says mental health stigma and barriers, distrust of medical and mental health systems in some black communities can be traced back to histories of exploitation and dehumanization. You know, these devils used to do science experiments on us to be able to progress in that medical, in the medical field. You know, hey man, the things that they did to us is really, you know, people would say unbelievable. And these Edomites really don't believe that it was that bad, man. You know, that's why Yahweh Shem Yahushua is going to come back and utterly waste this place and make these devils drink double the cup that we drunk, man. You know, we can't wait. Let's see, verse 22, it says, and I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And they shall no more they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all. Neither shall they defile themselves anymore with their idols, you know, because the laws are going to be written in our inward parts. You know, once we get these new bodies, it's all going to fall into place, man. It says, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, but I will save them out of all their dwelling places, all throughout the four corners of the earth. It says, wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them, so shall they be my people, and I will be their power. You know, so that's what's going on, man. That's what's going on as we speak. But, you know, we just had to go into the effects, you know, of slavery, you know, and basically, you know, which is causing, you know, the Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom to grow closer, man. You know, especially in these days. I think they call it trauma bonding or something like that. But, you know, it's all through the spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushua and that stick, man. So we'll get this one, you know, to further prove that the Lord is going to bring the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom back together in the last days. All right, this is the book of Amos, chapter 9 and verse 11. It says, in that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, you know, King David. You know, these other so-called Christians, you know, when they say everybody can be saved, you know, King David is not the king of everybody. You know, he's not the king of all nations, even though they'll be under rulership, you know, but heritage-wise, he's not the king of all nations. It says, and close up the breaches thereof, and will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. Restoration of Israel. Closing up the breaches. Let's get that. Because it's basically closing up the gap, the gap that's between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The kingdoms are going to come back together in the last days. Breach, gap, breach, broken wall, So basically, pretty much that's what it is, man. Just went into, the scattering, the restoration, the trauma, just to hit some points, man. But to the people out there, man, the so-called blacks, let's get it. So-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, hey, you're of the 12 tribes of Israel, through the spirit. We believe this, and we pretty much wholeheartedly know this, through prophecy, and our spirit is bearing witness. So with that being said, we want to constantly give our praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rekakwadash. Lord willing, it was edifying. And like I say, man, time is getting short. Time to come back, repent, and be converted. Shalom.